All right, welcome to CheConf 2016, everyone. It wouldn't be a real conference if there wasn't some kind of technical glitch. Just proves it's live. We're going to see a number of hosts and presenters today. I'm one of the Che committers, and we've got a number of other Che committers here today, helping out moderating questions and hosting these sessions. I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and let's talk about CheConf 2016. First of all, thank you to everyone for registering and joining. Of course, we're an open source project and we wouldn't be anything without the community. So this is a big thank you to all of you. I hope you find the content today engaging and enjoyable and entertaining and informative. So today, we're going to be streaming on YouTube, as you probably have seen. I had a slide up earlier, but just in case anybody missed it, the streaming window itself is essentially a little YouTube stream. So if you go down to the bottom of the streaming window, you'll kind of see some controls pop up. You can control the volume on the left-hand side. You can control the picture on the right-hand side. We would suggest manually setting the resolution to 720p. And if you still find it difficult to see, you can make the embedded video full screen. So that'll really let you use all the real estate. We welcome questions. I notice a lot of you have been posting questions in the chat and in the Q&A section. So that's awesome. Love that. Please keep doing that. As I said, we've got a number of people who are going to do their best to answer all those questions. If you don't get your question answered, or if you have follow-on questions, you can always visit our GitHub repo. It's github.com/eclipse/che. And drop us, create a new issue there with your question. We have all the committers kind of watching on that repo, and we're ready to jump in and help people out. All right. So without further ado, let's talk a little about what we're going to do today. We're going to start, of course, with the keynote presented by Tyler Jewell. That's going to be the introduction to Che. He's going to talk about the roadmap, about Che 5, in fact, about Che 6. So a lot of cool stuff in that. We're going to follow with some conversations about the language server protocol. This is a new open standard created by CodeEnvy, Red Hat, Microsoft, and which Che supports, that is going to make it possible to create essentially pluggable IntelliSense for different programming languages. Really cool stuff. Quinn Slack from SourceGraph is going to talk through that. They've created a number of these. We're then talk about hosting any project in Che. This is going to be about how to use Che's stacks and Che files to make it really easy for you to get your own open source or corporate project Cheified, if you will. Then we'll be joined by Patrick Chanzon from Docker, who's going to talk kind of a Docker 101, kind of independent of Che, just a good primer on Docker if you're not as familiar with it, as well as some of the aspects of Docker inside of Che. We'll move on around 2 p.m. Eastern. By the way, all these times are Eastern Standard Time, to extending Che. It's going to talk about creating extensions, creating assemblies, creating plugins. And we'll see an example of that right after in deploying Che to OpenShift, and talk a little bit about the work that Red Hat has done, both to make it possible to deploy to OpenShift from Che, but also deploy Che on OpenShift instances. So that's what I'm looking forward to. At 15:30, we'll have a pair programming conversation. That I know is something that a lot of people have asked about, and is something that we're really excited about. We've got some community contributions here. Suntan from Sarely is going to talk through how that project kind of got started and show off some of the syncing between desktop IDEs, cloud IDEs, Che, the whole thing. It's going to be actually very, very fun, very cool. And then you'll be with me. My name is Brad Mickley. I'm going to roll through from 4 p.m. to about 5:30 or so Eastern, talking about building an IoT IDE with Samsung called the Arctic IDE. Then I'll talk to you a little bit about CodeEnvy, which we kind of think of as Che for enterprises. And lastly, we'll finish off where we should, with the community, talking about how you can become part of the project, how to get engaged, how to contribute, all that great stuff. So we're really very thankful. We've had a lot of great presenters join CheConf. I'm really excited about the sessions, and hopefully you are too. One of the cool things we're doing here with Crowdcast, and one of the reasons why we chose this technology, is that you'll have noticed that you only received one link to this one Crowdcast session. And so what we're going to happen is we're going to essentially drag the audience from session to session. And that's really kind of quite convenient. You can leave the browser on and watch, or you can leave it in the background and kind of listen and then pop over and view it when you hear something of note. But it means that you don't really need to worry about physically moving around or changing links or any of that stuff. So sit tight. At the end of this session, there'll be a short pause, and then you'll get pulled into the language server protocol, and you'll just keep rolling on through the agenda. All right, so I think that's the housekeeping items. So without further ado, let's talk about the community roadmap. And I'd like to introduce Tyler Jewell, who's the project lead for Eclipse Che and the founder and CEO of CodeEnvy.
Thank you, Brad. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone that's participating today. It is very exciting and an honor for us to get to hold our first user conference after having been working on Che for a number of years. And on top of that, it's the first conference dedicated to cloud workspaces. So I'm really pleased to be here. We have a great set of sessions and speakers that we've been able to bring together for your and our benefit today. And this morning in this first session, I'd like to talk about Che, where we've come from, why we think that cloud workspaces are happening right now, and where we're taking it next, along with a number of announcements and plans that we're ready to unveil as well. So I'm going to switch over to the presentation and go into presentation mode for the next 30 minutes. So cloud workspaces are winning. This is an amazing year that we've been having, and that there has been a tremendous activity when you do searches for online IDE, cloud workspaces. And this basic trend, which comes from Google Trends, indicates the level of significance of what's going on. And there's a lot of evidence, a lot of evidentiary support to this basic trend. One basic statistic is that there are 2,000 people who registered for this conference. And when we announced CheConf about a month ago, we had hoped that we would get 200 registrations, and we blew through that in the first hour. So there is clearly a very strong interest and a demand for technologists to learn more about what it means to develop in the cloud. And as I look over at the Crowdcast, we even have 335 people online right now with us watching this session. And many of those other people will be able to watch the recordings that we have as well. Sorry, share the screen. So, in addition to the 2,000 people who are registered, when we take a look at these, Google Trends, you can see that desktop IDEs have been generally in decline for search criteria, and online IDEs have been in a rapid incline over the past year, with the past 12 months been the most intense interest. In addition to this, for the people who have registered with us, they are students, teachers, hobbyists, and representatives of the commercial industry. We have a lot of people from financial services companies, technology and software companies, and the rest of industry. All these companies have signed on and registered to participate in the event today. And it's definitely also global. And the participation represents all these different countries. We have somebody from each of these countries who have registered along the way. And you can see that it's not just North America, but anywhere that software development is being done, there is an interest in developing in the cloud. Other evidence that cloud workspaces are winning is just in the adoption of Eclipse Che. We announced it as a beta in January of this year, and since that time we have gotten telemetry on the actual usage of the product, and you can see that there's a significant number of hours of usage. And these numbers here were taken a few weeks ago, and we're actually now well over 100,000 hours of usage a week. And our support tickets, which is a great indication to us of whether users are getting value out of the product, the ways that they are trying to deploy it into various situations. These support tickets have just been increasing quite significantly, and we now have well over 2,000 that we're managing. On top of this, GitHub stars is a great reflection of whether people are supportive of the project, and forks is an indication of, hey, are we customizing it and extending it and going in different direction? And these are pretty significant numbers, both numbers that we've been able to develop over the past year. So things are trending. On top of that, we've been really impressed and honored with the ecosystem that has rallied around the project and has taken their own time to put effort into supporting this technology and this product going forward. And while my company CodeEnvy, we started it, all of these groups and organizations that you see on this screen have issued pull requests, provided support with tickets, documentation. They are actively involved in the project. And over the past 10 months, that's led us to have over 1,500 pull requests. And most of those pull requests have gotten merged in. And also for me, what's particularly exciting is that we have a policy that when you have 2 significant pull requests merged into a project, we nominate you for committer status, and that puts you on the path to becoming a maintainer of the project. And this year there's been about 20 people who have gained that committer status, and we kind of honor them. We really respect them, and that's very exciting for us. So clearly cloud workspaces are happening. Why are they happening? Or what is the future with this? What is the basic trends that are going on? And the essence of this, and I tell this story quite frequently, is that our basic goal here is that we want to allow anyone, anywhere, to contribute to a software project without installing software. And this is such a simple concept, but if you are a software developer, it's a really hard technology problem to overcome. And everybody universally feels the pain associated with this. I tell this story frequently. I'm gonna tell it again here. But the idea for Che and the idea for CodeEnvy happened for me 6 years ago. I had gotten sick, and when I had gotten sick, I had lost some of my cognitive abilities, and it took me 9 months to recover. And when I was healthy again, I wanted to reacquire some programming skills that I had had from a previous life. It had been a good 8 or 9 years since I had been actively programming, and I missed the confidence that came from writing logic and writing code and developing applications and seeing them work. So I sat down with Java and Eclipse and a bunch of other technologies, and after a number of days, I couldn't get the technology to install, I couldn't get the code to compile, I certainly couldn't get the sample applications to work, and it was a very frustrating experience for me. It was humiliating because I was classically trained in computer science. I had a programmer's background. I had spent most of my career around technology, so this should be easy. It should be an easy thing to do to get configured, but I couldn't do it. And it was in that moment of frustration where I was like, I don't understand why workspaces can't be generated on demand. Why can't there be a link for these workspaces? Why can't we click on them and then the workspaces generate what we need for that project at that point in time? And that was the basic idea. And that basic idea plays into this broader theme of, hey, let's let everybody anywhere contribute to projects without installing software. And if we can do that, then suddenly, technology and programming become a lot more accessible to users. And that allows us to make it easier for children, their parents, and their teachers to explore and learn together. It makes it easier for us to connect with our open source community because we can give them workspaces on demand that reflect our projects. And that's really important. And it makes agile development more natural because workspaces can come and go. You don't have to worry about how to set up your agile development environment. It's just always available for you. And that then leads to the ability to iterate in the moment with our users, because anybody can gain access to the code, anybody can compile it, and anybody can run it. And that's a very inspiring vision for us to go through. Cloud workspaces have come online over the past couple of years, and we constantly get asked this question about how are people using these today? And we have seen Che adopted in really these 5 categories. Our first indication that this was going to be a widely adopted product was when other product companies like SAP and Samsung and Red Hat started adopting Che to create their own products to generate smarter developer experiences with workspaces embedded inside their own products. With software eating the world, according to Andreessen Horowitz, every product is now a software product, and so therefore every product needs to win and retain developers. And so what better way to do that than to embed a workspace inside your product so that developers do not have to set it up. And then they can integrate with those APIs, they can do customizations, and it's a very empowering experience. Development teams, and more importantly, team leaders of those development teams, see cloud workspaces as a great way to template and to create reproducible development environments so that they can onboard their teams and provide a new form of collaboration for developers to interact with each other on shared templates. Enterprises are looking for workspace administration and management platforms so that they can organize their entire departments and organizations to have collaborative benefits, scaling workspaces, and providing additional resources so that they can have a standard way to implement a continuous development philosophy across all their teams. We've talked about the importance for teachers and educators, whether you are in high school or a parent or university. We have seen all these individuals adopt this product so that they can learn and share amongst their classroom. And of course, hobbyists, people who are just at the very early stages of learning about programming and the technology associated with that. It's absolutely exciting for them because they don't have to worry about setting up the technology. They can just provision a workspace on demand, and then they can make it portable so that it can follow them from computer to computer or even go offline with themselves. So these drivers have been what are bringing people to this technology. Eclipse Che is an open source project to make these cloud workspaces universal for developers. And it started off as a technology initiative, and it has turned into a product initiative. And for those of you who are not familiar with Che already, let's just walk through what our basic goals are with Che. Che does essentially 4 things. The first is that we are going to start with a production runtime stack. And a runtime here is some sort of operating system or virtual machine, but it is a place where you can edit code, build it, analyze it, test it, debug it. And you could start off with a development stack, but why do that? Let's start with a runtime stack, the same stacks that you would put into production if you were going to deploy your application. And these stacks can be packaged as Docker containers, which are images themselves. You can provide Docker files, which will create these things for you, and even now compose files, multi-container, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the idea is that if you are deploying an orchestrated set of runtimes as your production app, let's start with that and use that as the foundation for generating our workspace. The second thing that we do is that Che then dev modes that runtime. And so we want to take the production quality runtime, and then what we do is we are going to mount or clone your project code. So we go out to your repo, we'll clone it, and we'll do a local clone of that source code into the right runtimes. We then localize the artifact repository. So if you have an NPM repository or Maven repository, it will be localized within the runtime so that it's accessible by the code. And then we go through and inject a whole series of things that we call agents. And agents provide developer services to the developer. And so these are things like an SSH agent so that you can access one or more of these machines, a terminal agent which provides the web-based terminal access so that you can have bash commands or other command capabilities on your keyboard, IntelliSense agents which provide things like autocomplete, symbol lookup specific for a particular programming language, or desktop sync so that you can synchronize the workspace content to your local IDE. And we even go so far as to put in every workspace a Che agent, which is an agent that provides RESTful APIs, a programmable interface, and it's how we remotely manage each of these workspaces one at a time. But when you take this production runtime and add in all these things, it has gone from being a performance optimized production runtime to something that you can now edit, you can now build your code, you can do IntelliSense with it, and we can even run a debugger inside of it. And after we have dev moded the workspace, we then have each workspace host Che's browser IDE, which is one that we've built up over time. Or now with our Che mount capability, you can mount and sync your local desktop IDE to the workspace. And so what that means is that we synchronize the project files off of the workspace to your local desktop, and you can have this two-way sync mechanism. And lastly, then the Che service itself is a server that you run that hosts these workspaces, and you can have one or more workspaces. And you can have users then sharing these workspaces together collaboratively or using them independently. And since we package up Che as a Docker container, you can run multiple Che servers on different ports. So you can have an entire Che farm of these workspaces that are hosted in different locations, accessible by these both browser and desktop IDEs. So with Che, we announced it earlier this year, and that was actually our 4th generation version of the product. We had gone through 3 other generations before we announced it. The project had not gotten a meaningful traction. We had gotten some early support with SAP. They had been a big participant with the 3rd generation. But with all the previous generations, we had not quite got the right workspace model down. The relationship between the workspace and the runtimes and the commands, things were just not in a way where it felt natural or human for developers to hop into the workspace and do development. And when we announced Che 4 earlier this year, we had changed the workspace model to have all of its dependencies, including the runtime and the IDE inside of it. And the understanding of the community took off, and we had the traction that you see. And we GA'd Che 4 in March. It was about 9 or 12 months of engineering, and there were, I think, 4,000 commits. And now we're ready to take that next step, and we're announcing Che 5. In Che 5, the goal here has been to have a workspace server and Cloud IDE supporting production grade runtimes, of any orchestration, the language server protocol that we announced earlier this year, and for Che to run anywhere. And we just made our milestone 7 release. It's available. We've updated all of our CI systems so that you can now download and run this. And we're planning general availability of Che 5 in 6 to 10 weeks. But let's take a look at what parts of this we've announced. The first thing is that with production runtimes, we now support Docker Compose workspaces. So when you generate a workspace, you can choose a stack from us, or you can now write a Docker Compose file. And a Docker Compose file is a nice YAML syntax that allows you to define multiple containers and the relationships that they have to one another. And we will honor these relationships and provision these containers and then mount your code into the right location. And so if you were to get Che 5, there is in the default stacks a Java plus MySQL stack. You can click on that. And this is the Docker Compose syntax that you can write. And we'll go and create these different containers, and you get terminals into each one, both the database and the dev machine. Your project code goes into one of the machines. And then we link those machines together into a common network so that they have visibility to one another. And you can write these, and you can have these images reference either Docker file that you provide, or images from a private registry, or images from a Docker Hub. And we've been testing this extensively. We have some sample Docker Compose syntaxes on the docs, and we have instructions for how you can write your own on our docs page. And it's really interesting because typically Docker Compose is something that you run on your desktop. But now we've moved it into the cloud. And with it being in the cloud, there are certain things related to Docker that assume locality, such as copying files or adding them. And as we've moved Docker Compose into a distributed system, we've had to work with or work around some of these locality issues to make them work in a distributed fashion. So definitely read up on the docs. And start using this. We're excited to see some really advanced Compose workspaces being created.
Tyler, sorry to interrupt. It seems like we're getting a little bit of breakup from your audio. Do you mind just checking your connections and stuff?
Okay, let's take a look at connection. I've got I'm on the LAN wired line here. So
yeah, it's strange because it's like perfectly consistent. Like it's just kind of chopping through everything you're saying just a little bit.
Let's do a refresh on the Hangout. All right, share my screen.
No, the audio I think is better.
Okay, maybe the refresh of the Hangout fixed it here. About what part did it kill here?
No. I think we could still understand you through it, Tyler. Okay. It was just it was just a little bit choppy. So maybe if you can just mention where people can learn more about the Compose, and then jump back into stack editing.
Okay. All right. Great. So is the audio active here for me?
Yeah, it sounds good now.
All right. Thank you. All right. Sorry, we had a little bit of an audio issue there. A little refresh. Never hurt anyone. So we were wrapping up on the Docker Compose announcement. We have in the Eclipse Che docs, there is a page there called Workspace Stacks and Workspace Recipes. Take a look at those 2 pages. We have all of our specifications on how to go about working with this. The next thing is now, since your workspace can be powered by Docker files or Compose files, or any variety of different runtimes, it becomes a really interesting exercise for the team leader who wants to set up a workspace either for himself or for the rest of his team. How do you create these things? And how do I debug them? And we now have a visual stack editor that we have put into Che. And it allows you to, with the GUI, you can add machines to generate a composed syntax. You can inject or remove agents from those machines. You can define environment variables, which will be available within the machines when they start. And you can have more fine-grained control over the RAM settings that are in there. And it is not an M7. I believe it's going to show up in M8 in another week, but we actually have inline stack debugging within the dashboard now, so that you can define a compose file. You can then build a test workspace with sample code, and you can verify that the workspace comes online, that the agents are injected properly, that there is no conflict with your environment variables, and that your project code is properly mounted with the appropriate keys. And so we're working to facilitate this very rapid edit, test, debug cycle for workspace generation, so that once you template the workspace and place it into a stack, you can give it to the rest of your team, and you're verified that it's going to work. Agents are a new capability that we have talked about them conceptually, but we have formalized them in this version of the product. And this is really important to us, because in the Che 4 version, you needed to use workspaces which inherited from a Che Docker image. And the Che Docker image would install important things that we needed in order to do our job, like a JVM and whatnot. And that really wasn't ideal, because it limited your ability to take off-the-shelf Docker images like Ubuntu or Debian or Alpine and work with them as a developer workspace. Well, that's no more. We have gotten rid of virtually all those dependencies, and now you can work with any Docker image off the shelf. Our only requirements are that the Docker image needs to have bash installed, which most base images do, and that the Docker image then has a non-terminating command at the end of it, which allows it to not terminate, which allows us to gain access into that. And then all of the other software that we need is now packaged. It's what's called an agent. We have these language servers that are here for IntelliSense. There are other agents that are there. And the agents both install the software that's necessary after the workspace is running, and then it runs that software as well. And these are now configurable in the user dashboard. You can also write your own. These agents can be packaged up as zip files. They're essentially programs that you can run inside the workspace. And so you can launch these agents, provide additional services into that, and then access them from the browser if you do a customization. Also coming, very important, is intelligent commands. For those of you who have been really keen, if you go into our GitHub issues list and take a look at the epics, there is an epic in there called Intelligent Commands, and it's been floating around quietly for about 2 months now. And intelligent commands are an important contribution, which is going to allow you to define build, run, debug, test packaging goals that are things that will achieve an objective for the end user. So if you have a run objective or a run goal, if you will, that's really important, because in order to achieve the run goal, there's a whole series of dependencies, such as, hey, the project needs to be built. The project may need to be packaged as well. The project may need to be deployed. So by defining these very abstract goals and their associated dependencies, there's a real consistency around how commands can be presented to the user. We have then a commands explorer that's going to go in there. It's a visual commands explorer, so that you can add, remove, and edit your commands. Edit these commands and then associate them with a particular goal. And then we marry it up with what we're calling the minimalism toolbar that will let you target these goals, execute those goals. And also, as part of these goals, we will do machine discovery. So if you want to run a command like maven clean install, and you have a workspace with a production runtime that has many containers, where are you sending that command? Are you sending it to the first container, the second container, the third container? And so we've got machine discovery with intelligence of where these commands need to execute, and we'll target it for them. As we mentioned, we've now added SSH and local IDE sync. With SSH, we're now automatically generating public and private keys. Your keys are injected into all your workspace machines. So if you use Compose and you create multiple machines, the keys are there, and you can now add and remove your own keys. And then with local IDE sync, this is pretty exciting in that we have a Docker container that we built that allows you to synchronize your workspace projects from the workspace to any desktop on any OS, and this is including Windows. And you don't need to install PuTTY, you don't need to install some sort of complicated thing like SSHFS. It just requires Docker. And inside that Docker container, what we're doing is we do a SSH file system mount automatically. We then do a unison sync between your workspace and that container, and then that unison sync moves those files onto your host-mounted system. And that runs locally on your desktop. And then we've also paired that with an optional desktop sync agent that you can deploy inside of your workspaces, and they will work in tandem with each other to actually make the syncing profile 10 times faster. And so the desktop sync that runs inside your workspace, it does a constant scan to understand what needs to be synced, and that minimizes the traffic of what to be synced down to the desktop. And then you can finally pair this with a unison profile to either target only a certain set of files for syncing or to exclude a set of files for syncing, so that maybe you don't need to sync a Maven repository or an NPM repository, and you can make the sync virtually instant with that. So common across all operating systems, just uses Docker as a dependency, and super fast data sync for use of your local IDE. We've also added in a utility that we call Chater. This is very important for providing configurable and reproducible workspaces. And Chater, the simplest way to think of Chater is that it's like Vagrant, but for Che here. And so you can now, on your desktop, do a git clone repo. You can go into that source repo, and then you can do a Chater up on it. And what Chater does is it will first discover whether a Che server is running. If not, it will boot one for you. And then it will take the source code repository that's running on your desktop and move it to be a workspace that's inside of Che, that's programmable and shareable with other people. And we will do this according to a Che file. If you don't have a Che file, we'll make some assumptions there. But you can place a Che file inside of your repo, and then you can specify which Docker image you want to use for your workspace, whether it's a Compose file, add some commands, define the RAM, and the Che workspace that is generated will be set up properly. And what's great is that when you go into the Che server, it's set up to use Git. So you can add files, you can commit them to the local repo, and those changes will be reflected on your local Git clone on the desktop as well. So Chater, great for building a consistent workflow so that you have reusable workspaces here. Then in June of this year, when we were at Red Hat Dev Nation, we were able to do an announcement with Microsoft and Red Hat on the language server protocol. And this was a little announcement that has had a big impact. And the idea behind the language server protocol was, hey man, there are dozens, if not now hundreds of programming languages that are out there. It is too expensive and virtually impossible for one editor to support all those languages, because each language has a slightly different protocol for how you gain access to syntax coloring, code completion, refactoring, symbol lookup. There's a few dozen things that are essential for the developer experience that you need for every language. And at the same time, these language providers did not have the resources to integrate with all the tools that are out there. So what's happened over time is that you've seen really good tools for one language, and that's it. So you've got a tool for language, and it just kind of kills the ecosystem and limits innovation. And so the language server protocol standardizes the protocol on how a tool will communicate with a programming language, so that you can now have many different programming languages with IntelliSense working on a single tool, or you can have many tools making use of the same IntelliSense library. And we announced that in June, and we have now implemented the first version of that protocol. It's shipping in 5.0. And on top of that, we have started the process of packaging up important language servers for reuse. In this version that we have now, there are language servers for C#, PHP, Java, CSS, Go. And I got to give a shout out to SourceGraph and Red Hat and Zend for working diligently to package up these language servers and make them accessible and help us test to verify that Che works with the protocol correctly. And on top of that, SourceGraph has been sponsoring a variety of open source initiatives to bring other languages into the language server protocol. And all of these languages on the right now exist, and we're going through the exercise of packaging them up so that they can be automatically available inside of Che, so that when you open a file or a project type of this particular file code, these language servers will be available to you. And with that, Zend and has had a couple of engineers go, well above and beyond. In addition to adding the language server, they have added project types for PHP. There's a parser and code sniffer support. They've added their own debugger. So there's a Zend debugger now, which provides, I think this is the 4th debugger that we've added into the system. And they've certified this to work with the Astro Splash demo, and then added in specialized stacks as well. So the Zend crew has been very active in this, and the system is now a really good PHP development environment. Next, we think that in order for this vision of letting anyone contribute anywhere, we have to make it deadly simple to run Che anywhere at any time. And as part of this, we have been on this long exercise this year to package up Che as a Docker container. We now make the Docker container the default execution model, but we've gone further with this. First, we're really excited to announce that Docker is joining the Eclipse Che project. They have been working in collaboration with us and making commits, and their commits have been around getting Che certified for the Docker store, and also around certain related Docker Swarm capabilities. But Docker is joining the Eclipse Foundation. They are part of the Eclipse Che project, and they'll be doing an announcement on their blog post today in conjunction with this, along with Patrick Chanazon, who's going to be doing a presentation. Of equal emphasis, Red Hat has done a huge amount of work to get certified stacks for Red Hat Enterprise Linux and CentOS that are part of your workspace stack library. And on top of that, there has been a massive undertaking to be able to run Che on OpenShift. And I really encourage you to see Mario's presentation a little bit later today, where he's breaking it down on how to deploy Che natively on OpenShift so that your workspaces are also deployed as OpenShift capabilities. And the next thing is Che providers, which we'll talk about in just a moment, but are essential for custom assemblies having a consistent deployment experience of Che no matter where you go. So we've been really excited by the relationship with Docker. They have certified Che on the store. That means that it has achieved certain security standards. It's also going to be a supported product through the Docker store and available through the Docker data center. So welcome, Docker, and congratulations on the achievements there. Last, Che providers, which will come in 5.1. And the essential part of this is that it's about a common, consistent CLI experience for custom assemblies. So if you want to create your own custom Che, such as what we do with CodeNV or what Samsung has done with the Arctic IDE, what we want is a single assembly that you can then get a very consistent CLI experience so that you don't have to customize the CLI, and that anyone everywhere can run Che with configuration management, backup recovery, and offline installation in a standardized way, and Che providers provide for that. And we've actually been able to develop a really simple and elegant syntax. It's coming online pretty shortly here, but you actually will be able to do Docker run Che as the only syntax, and it will then provide some help commands on how you go about configuring it for your unique operating system. And this syntax will work identically for different providers of Che, and we'll get a bit away from this branching that we've had on it so far. So we're pretty excited by this. As we wrap up here, I'd just like to take a couple of moments to talk about my company, CodeNV. This is yes, this is an open source project, and we're all part of a community together. But we are a commercial company, and we do depend upon the patronage of important commercial entities that allow us to keep funding the development of Che. And what CodeNV does is we make cloud workspaces for development teams. And sometimes we call this like, Che Enterprise. But what we do is we take Che and we package it up so that you have one-click Docker environments with a form of automation. We have workflows for onboarding your team and collaboration. And then we have this platform for enterprise DevOps teams to program their workspaces as well. And essentially, we take Eclipse Che and all of the plugins that are provided, and we certify that package. We then add on team and organization extensions for multiple users, multi-tenancy. There's a Jira plugin, a Visual Studio plugin, pull requests, permissions management, and a security enforcement. And then we layer it on a scalable, manageable DevOps infrastructure and provide support. And we do depend upon your patronage, and we sell this as a commercial offering on a per user per year basis for your own on-premises infrastructure, or you can sign up at codenv.io and get a hosted service as available for you. And a little bit later this year, we'll actually allow you to add RAM, add users to the hosted service so that you can do it at codenv.io, or you can install your own. And with that, an announcement from us is that we've Dockerized CodeNV. So previously, if you've ever wanted to run your own CodeNV, you needed to use Puppet, and it was somewhat of a tedious installation. And we have used the Che provider's capability here, and in order to develop the Che providers, we did it first with CodeNV, and we're now bringing it into Che. But the syntax is simple. You just go Docker run CodeNV CLI start, and that will put you on the process of running a fully clustered CodeNV system that has all those capabilities that you saw before. And I encourage you to take a look at Brad Migley's presentation. He's going to walk through it and show you what this is all about later today, and kind of demo some of the features of what CodeNV makes great. And we also have a CodeNV repository. We've kept this hidden. Mostly it's now publicly available. And we've got lots of docs on how you can run this on any operating system, Windows, Mac, whatever it is, and you can run a clustered CodeNV system, which is an enterprise Che provider. And with that, we're already thinking about Che 6 for 2018, and the themes for that right now are focused on performance and the IDE. And with performance, our objective here is that we believe that we can make development extremely faster in the cloud than it was ever on your desktop. And we can do that by taking agents and distributing them so that instead
Hey,
of
Tyler.
Yep.
Sorry, your audio's gone wonky again. Mind popping back out and back in? Sorry about that, folks. We'll be back online here in a second.
Okay.
All right. So if you can restart from the code in v6, just start from there, and you should be good.
CheConf16. Okay.
Yeah, CheConf16. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, we had another audio wonkiness, but we're back again. Thank you, Brad. So again, starting with CheConf16, we're already thinking about what comes next. And because we just don't like sitting still, and our focus here is on performance and IDE. Now we are very confident that we can make the performance of your workspace in the cloud faster than it ever could be on your desktop. And the reason being is that when you're on your desktop, your desktop bears the burden of the workload for your project code plus the runtimes, and it's all on that single machine. While today we mostly inject your agents inside the workspace, they don't need to be there. And we can actually distribute these agents like the desktop sync, the language server protocol, and even the workspace APIs that we deploy as a Che agent inside. These things don't necessarily need to be inside your workspace. So we can distribute them, we can put them onto different physical nodes so that your actual code and your workspace runtime has as much or as little resource allocation to it as it needs. And we can do a lot of interesting things with distribution of these services here. And in the case of the IDE, we've been building this IDE over 5 years, but we're going to be really focused on how to make extension development really joyful so that you can, with a single click or just a single button push, get a new extension, make it be debuggable so that you can just focus on working on the extension without having to worry about the infrastructure related around that. And also as part of that, we will repackage the IDE in such a way where we can simultaneously have it both be a desktop and a browser app, probably with Electron, but this is a big focus area for us. And we're going to be getting our maintainers together and working on this very intensively starting in the new year. We'll end the day with community and contributions to Che. I spent a lot of time talking about what we've achieved, but we don't achieve this without everybody together. And I have made so many important relationships working with people from all those companies that were in the ecosystem, and it's really important. And that Che is only going to be successful if we can get the entire company to come together. So whether you just do something as simple as report a bug, or you make an enhancement request, or even just commenting on the documentation, those things all really do matter. So we really would like people to get together and contribute. And if you're a programmer and this inspires you and you want to become a real part of the project, start issuing pull requests. Get 2 major pull requests merged and you can become a committer and have even a broader influence over the project. We maintain our entire process on the wiki. We document our roadmap there. We try to do everything with total transparency. So there's nothing that you cannot get involved with as part of that project. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Brad. Again, thank you for being part of this project. I hope that today inspires you and is informative and educational. Take part in as little or as many of these sessions as there. Ask questions. The entire Che team is available for you, and let's have a great event.
Thanks very much, Tyler, and thank you, everyone. Apologies for the little bumps in audio. The next session is going to be the language server protocol. I've seen there's been a lot of questions about this already in the chat, so perfect timing. We've got Quinn Slack from Sourcegraph who's going to be doing that session. Now, the beautiful thing, again, about this, the way we're handling these presentations, is that there is only one link. So we're going to kind of almost drag the whole audience from this session, the keynote, to the next session, which is language server protocol. So the nice thing is that for you, as audience members, you don't need to touch anything. You don't need to get another link. You don't need to click anything. Just sit tight. There's probably going to be a delay of about 30 seconds to a minute before you're kind of pulled into the next session and it starts. But be patient. It will start, and we'll get you on over there. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next session.